Hiya. Today I want to discuss test-driven development with BLAZOR. Now obviously BLAZOR is quite a new technology, and as such there's not really any libraries or any sort of firm standpoint on how you should test a BLAZOR application. Up until now, a lot of people, what they generally do is separate out all of the services, components, etc. into a shared library, and then you'd write the tests against the shared library. But obviously you Razor pages and Razor components for BLAZOR, you can't actually test them. So what I've been playing with over the last couple of days is a library called bunit, and what that allows you to do is, well, it's almost like a cross between test-driven development or standard unit testing and browser automation. So what you can do is target a page, a BLAZOR page, load it up, and then interact with it. So click buttons on the page and then verify that expected outcomes have occurred. So let's say, for example, on the BLAZOR app that I'm going to be using here, in the standard template for this demo, there is a counter page. You click a button and it increments a counter by 1. With this bunit, we will be able to script HTML from the page before and after the button's been clicked, and then assert that the count is 1. Also going to do a quick test to say, is it a 0 when it's first loaded? Now obviously with standard test-driven development, you would create the tests first until they fail, then write the code and refactor. But because I'm working from a solution that already exists here, this is more of a demo of how you can do it, not how you should do it. But anyway, yeah, let's give it a name. So demo TDD BLAZOR. Now, when you create the project in BLAZOR, you've got two options: BLAZOR server-side, BLAZOR WebAssembly. WebAssembly ostensibly creates the client's web browser as the actual server. So it'll download a big package when it first loads, which contains all of the code to be able to convert the C# and the Razor pages into WebAssembly. So while the user's actually using the page, the change trees are all built up on the client and then processed using the C# WASM engine on the actual browser. The good thing about that is that you can create offline applications. Conversely, BLAZOR server-side apps works slightly differently. The page is processed server-side, and the change tree, the DOM trees, are all passed back through a Signal persistent connection to the server to process, and then it talks back, passes a connection down and tells it what's changed and what events to fire. There's no other big differences. Everything that I'm going to discuss today in bunit will work in either type of server-side, client side or server side. And to be honest, if you were to create a server-side app anyway, it's just a couple of lines of code to change it over to WebAssembly. I would probably recommend that anyone developing actually does it that way anyway, because WebAssembly is sort of, at the moment, ridiculously hard to separate points in and test. So I would generally develop your app in server-side and then switch it over to WASM when you're ready, if that's what you want to do. The only other sort of thing to be aware of, or gotcha as it may be, is the differences in dependency injection scopes. So within WebAssembly, because you're running the server as such on the browser, your singleton instance is going to be scoped just to the application running within that browser, whereas a singleton scopes dependency running on a Signal server-side connection is going to be across the entire scope of the application there, which means that anyone connecting to it, creating a browser, will see the same instance of that service or class. There's a couple of other differences. I mean, transient's the same across both because it creates a new instance every single time. And which ones have I mentioned already? So transient and scoped and singleton. So yeah, then we've got scoped, haven't we? So the scoped instance in server side is basically scoped to the vSignal connection, whereas in WASM it's scoped to, well, it's exactly the same as a singleton instance within BLAZOR WebAssembly, in that it's scoped across the entire application instead of a connection like with this. Anyway, yeah, I digress. So we're going to use individual user accounts. Not going to bother with SQL Server. Just going to use SQL Server Compact for speed. Going to stick with server side because, as I said, it's easier to debug. .NET 5 because always latest and greatest as far as I'm concerned. And let's go. So once the application's run, the first thing that I generally will do is update the database, because we're obviously using ASP.NET Identity. And with ASP.NET Identity, you need to create that database with the tables and whatnot in it. And a quick update database will do that. And then I'll quickly run it and show the pages and what we're going to do. Okay, brilliant. So we're up and running. Let's load that page. I'll load rather the BLAZOR demo application. Excuse me. So here we go. Yeah, within pages, we've got the fetch data page and the counter page. They're the two main ones that we're going to be looking at today. Obviously, as well, the authorization is going to take a bit of interest as well, because in order to test a page with authorization, we're going to need to create a test double and fake that logged in user. So here's the counter page. Click it and it just updates the little paragraph there. It says current count, fetch data. It just loads in some fake weather forecast data. So let's close that and I'll show you the code versions of those. So under pages, starting with counter. There we got our paragraph, current count, at current count, and a button on the onClick method calls the increment count here, which literally just increments current count about 1 each time it's clicked. Updating that. So the things that we're going to test on this then is when the page first loads, the current count shows 0, and then we're going to interact with the button, click it, and then assert that the count goes up to 1. Within fetch data, we're going to have to create a mock of the service here, and then inject it in, and then verify that our mocked service with its mocked weather forecast appears in the page. And the final thing I want to do is just set up authorization into a page, so that when a user logs in, or rather when a fake mocked user logs in, it displays what they're supposed to see. So what we're going to do then first is add a new project to the top level of this. Let's set xunit. xunit.NET Core and C#. We can call that BLAZOR tests. Brilliant. The tests are going to need to be able to see the main project. So we add a dependency to the demo TDD Blazor, and then we need to get a couple of NuGet packages. The NuGet package we need to get, one is bunit, then we need to get the bunit xunit extensions, which allow xunit to interact with bunit, and then because I'll be mocking up some services later, we'll need mock as well. The important thing to remember is because currently bunit is in beta, soon to be version 1 hopefully, that you need to click include pre-release. So let's start with bunit. We just need to get the standard bunit library, testing for Blazor components, then bunit.xunit, which is the xunit extension, and then the final piece of this puzzle is mock, latest stable version. Okay, so it looks like already I've got dependency issues. Hopefully when I do a restart, okay, so tdd blazor.cs proj targets. Okay, so it looks like it just needs updating to .NET 5. Hopefully we'll be sound. Obviously I'm doing this sort of as a flying by the seat of my pants type demo, so there will be a few me scratching my head, but hopefully not too much. Brilliant. So let's give our unit tests a more useful name. So this class here is going to be specifically for testing the counter, so let's call this counter tests. Okay, all of the tests need to be marked with the fact attribute and given a useful name. So the first test we're going to do is just to assert that when we log in, the count is 0. So let's do that. So in order to implement the bunit functionality, we need to inherit from test context, which gives us the ability to be able to use all of the bunit goodness. Okay, so it looks like something's not loaded properly. So let's check our NuGet packages. So before, when it was a different version, it obviously didn't install bunit because of the .NET differences. So we'll just go and get them again now. Taking its time this time. And bunit.xunit. Excuse me. And finally, mock again. we go, brilliant. So every single test that I will be writing will be using an instance of test context. So instead of actually spinning up a new one in each, what let's do is create a test context as a property, test context, tc equals new test. There we go, brilliant. So this should be a really simple test. Basically all we're going to need to do is literally render the razor page, which is as simple as tc, which is our test context, and then dot render component, takes angle brackets, and then we pass in the name of the component we want to test, which is counter. Drop the cs, the razor off it, sorry. And there we go. So what that'll do is that renders a, well, I'll show you, let's run this test. So when we hit the breakpoint, it will actually spin up a version of the counter page as if a browser had hit it. We'll get the markup and a bunch of methods that allow us to interact with the page. So here we go, about to hit the breakpoint in 3, 2, 1, go. Close enough. Right, so there, as I said, we got the markup, shows the page. None of the C# that shows on the actual page is there, because as I said, this is how the browser sees it. So we can already verify there that the current count is 0. So what we're going to do is use the page.find method, and what it does is takes CSS selectors in order to be able to find the element that you're looking for. With find, it will only find the first one on the page. There is a find all, but then you'll need to use link or array and index to access the one you need. So what we can do is find the P and then assert that the markup matches that. So current count equals 0. So now if we were to run it, we get no errors and our test would pass. And there you go, a passing green test, happy days. Just to sort of give you an idea of what it would look like if it failed, we'll set this to 1 because obviously it won't be at 1. Rerun the test, and it gives a nice little bit of output that explains what it found as opposed to what it was supposed to be looking for. There we go, that was quick. So you can see there the following errors were found. Actual HTML current count 0, but it expected current count 1 and failed. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to show you how to do is to actually interact with the page and click a button. So we're going to need to add one little bit here, which is again page.find. We'll find CSS selector button, and then we'll click it. And it will say current count 1. So let's run the tests, make sure they all pass. So say assert count is 0 when page loads is still failing. Why is that? So current actual HTML and expected HTML is current count 1. Assert count is 1 when clicked. Okay, that's still failing from last time because it didn't run it. So now we should see algorithm. There we go, a bunch of greens. So the next thing to do is within BLAZOR, a lot of the time you're going to use what's known as cascading parameters. So one view higher up in the hierarchy passes down its data to the next one. An example of this is authorization. So I'm going to add some fake authorization into the counter page. Here we go. Just boilerplate code here to load in a user claim principle from the authorization. So it's a task of the authentication state. We'll give that a name of auth state, and let's make it gettable and settable. So the next thing I'm going to need to do is I want to display on the page higher up if the user's logged in or not. So let's have a bool to represent that. Logged in, and that uninitialized defaults to false, so that's good enough. And then when the authorization state loads from the auth state, we can extract the user. So we need a claims principal. So let's have a private system, or private split string. We don't want that there. System dot security dot claims principal. Call you user, and brilliant. So on the authorization page, or the authorization, there's a method that's called when the page loads. That's called onInitializedAsync. So we need to override that. Task on initialize with a Z, because you're American. Async. And then we can actually await the auth state being loaded. So let's do that. Wait auth. User. Okay. So why are you not happy with that? Authentication state does not contain a definition for user. I see. Okay, my apologies, I've been an idiot here. So we actually need to await auth state before it returns it. And then we can assign our user to be that. Happy days. So from the user now, we can see if it's authenticated. So logged in. Cool. So that's all I'm going to do for now. We could add some roles, checks. but for now I'm just going to roll with if they're logged in or not. So we'll have a little paragraph and say user is, and then we'll evaluate logged in. That's equal to true. And then we shall say logged in, else not logged in. So that should work. We can quickly check that now. We'll load up the page. Now, this is useful for me to show you this because there's not much documentation on the web on this, and it took me a little bit of time to figure out how to do this. Because we're now using a cascading parameter within bunit, it tries to render the page as if it was the marker was left as it was, but it wouldn't be aware of the sort of parent page, which is the authorization, in order to render it, and it would fail. So we have to declare the main page as the authorization state and then set a child of the page that we're looking for. So usually it's not logged in. It's going to register a Noddy account, xx@xx.com. And then it's going to ask us to confirm our account. And then we can log in and hopefully it remembers to type it in. Yes, it does. And user is logged in. Brilliant. So that's working. We can now get to testing that. So on this unit test, we now need to do the bit that I was just mentioning, which is to set the cascading authentication state as a parent. So cascading authentication state. And then a little bit of lambda to set the child. So s is lambda s dot add child content, and then that is child content of type counter again. Okay. So the next test we're just going to do an assert user is logged in. So I think it might be worth having a authorization context at this level now. So test auth for so there we go. It needs to use the bunit testables library equals new. In fact, no. Let's just have it as a get settable and set it in a constructor this time. Okay, so in that we're going to set auth context ta equals test context dot add test authorization. Brilliant. So that adds the test authorization modules and bits and pieces into the test context and will allow us to effectively do this. So tc dot I believe we're looking for set. Oh no, it's auth context dot what did I call that variable again? Property. TA test. Set authorized. Can just provide anything here. And then the type of state that they're in. So authorization state dot authorized. Cool. So now when this page loads, it will already have a user that's effectively logged in, baked, or doubled up. So because if we look at the Razor page, under pages, Razor counter, because we've got a paragraph here and then a paragraph here, find isn't going to cut it now because it's just going to pull back this, so we need to use find all. And then I could import system.link, but I'm going to be lazy and just say the element at 1, because obviously element at 0 is the counter. And if we go back into the counter again, grab this, we can assert that our markup matches user is logged in. Yeah. Okay, let's run our test now and assert it all passes. So far we've basically discussed how to read text from a page, how to click a button on a page, and then read values on a page to verify that the action or event that fired caused the change that you expected. And we've injected authorization into the page so we can assert that components show what they should for a logged in user. So there we go, assert user shows is logged in. Okay, so that's all of our tests passing. So I'm going to create now a new testing class as such. Let's name this one something a little bit more useful and call it get data tests. And we don't need that anymore because there's no authorization on that page. And we don't need the constructor because nothing happening there. We can delete all but one of these. Let's call that check logged in. No. Inject service and loads results. So we're going to use link to this one. And the page here is fetch data. I'll just show you what this looks like. So inject weather forecast service, and then for each weather forecast, it loads in table row. Now, because we're doing test-driven development here and have a B unit and mock. Mock actually requires concrete implementations to have an interface, so we need to slightly change things up and create an interface for the weather forecast service. So I'm just going to go and do that now. Lazy and create it in the same file and call it iWeather Forecast Service. Let's get rid of the date times because it makes life easier for testing. And implement that. So in the startup, you actually have to register for the dependency injection, the services. So we're just going to change this to have a interface. Weather forecast service. Weather forecast service. Okay, so that's erroring because I haven't done the needful inheritance. So we pretty much should be good to go now. Let's just check in the page that not passing a parameter. And I think we should be good to go. Okay. So the first thing we're going to need to do then is to mock that service. So let's start with doing that. Start from scratch. So to service equals new Once we create this mock of that, we need to set it up. So now I think it's a task, isn't it? Yeah. So it needs to return a task from result. And then it's an array of weather forecasts. So we want a new array. New weather. And let's give some stuff, and that's the date equals datetime.now. Summary equals temperature C equals 1 degree C. So let's have a look at what we could have as a summary. Let's have a sweltering. In fact, 1 degree C is actually pretty cold. So bracing, not quite freezing. So there we go. We now have a service set up. So now we need to use the dependency injection on the services. Dot add. This is singleton curve, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Yeah. Add, which means we need the Microsoft dependency injection class. Have I got an error at the end of this? No. Okay, and we can add our iWeather forecast service. And that takes the service. No, but the service, mock service, doesn't represent the service.object does. So that returns us an object of that service, which has this method getFileCodeAsync, which returns that. So now when it renders the page, what we should find is that we have a table with a single weather forecast in it. Right, here we go. I'm ready. Okay, so unspotted expression. None of our multiple members here getFileCodeAsync may not be used in setup verification expressions. May not be used in setup verification. Okay. So what have I done wrong? Weather forecast to get may not be used in setup verification expressions. Okay, let's look at our service and see if I've messed something up. Okay, I think I understand now what that error means. I think it means that somewhere we've declared this concrete implementation and not, I know where it'll be. Right, so need to check on the top of the fetch data page, and I bet, yeah. So let's rerun that. Yeah, obviously this isn't something I've done much, or at least with this library before. It's probably the second time I've ever used it, and I'm just running by the seat of my pants. So yeah, we had 2 errors there. I need to make sure I'm using the interface and not the actual class. Sweet. So now if we look at the page, we can see today's date, temperature's 1, Celsius, 33 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's bracing. So what we can do is grab that and then assert that our matchup matches that. Obviously in a real life test, that's annoying. In a real life test, we're not going to know that the date that's been returned is the 9th of the 12th, 2020, for example. So you need to declare that as a variable beforehand and inject it into the string, but for the sake of this and simplicity, and just to show how this works, I'm just going to go with the string because I know exactly what it is. I actually don't think it's space sensitive either, but just to make sure. Cool. So now the HTML comparison compared. So the reason for that is that it needs to find the t-body. So now if I just run all tests, this should all pass. So there is quite a lot more you can do with this library. I mean, the main thing that I haven't covered is you can actually write tests with razor fragments, but you can read all about it on the actual website. So an example of this would be in the documentation. There's not very much documentation at all on this currently, but what you can do is write a test in razor syntax as I mentioned here. And then expected output, then it will actually run the test from the razor code markup. It's actually pretty cool. But yeah, that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to discuss really on BLAZOR unit testing today. Hopefully it'll download itself and have a bit of a play, and all being well, it should come out of beta soon and into version 1. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.